what's up everyone, Rage Golden Eagle here, having way too much fun as always. And oh boy do I got a good one for you guys today. And as a public service, here's the important bit right at the start. So if you don't want to hear me ramble throughout the rest of the video, you can just cut it right now after hearing this news and go about your day. But in case you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard the big news yet, freaking SJW Sony has decided to censor the US and European releases of Senran Kagura Burst Renewal on the PS4. Links will be in the description if you want to look into it more for yourselves. Now I actually waited a little bit first to see if it's the same in Europe as it is in the US, because they just kind of took down all their pre-orders for a while, and yes, it turns out it is the same in Europe. And second, to see if Sony may come to their senses. Obviously they haven't, but they did manage to put their foot in their mouth and meme themselves pretty good though. More on that shortly. But for now, yes, censorship confirmed. So knowing this, if you had pre-ordered the game or were planning on getting it for the PS4, I hope you're okay with censorship. Because as it stands right now, if you want the uncensored version, you'll either have to import it from Japan or get it on Steam, which conveniently will launch same day as the PS4 version this time around. So hey, we at least got that bit of good news going for us. Simultaneous PC releases for Senran Kagura at last. And yes, just to reiterate, only the PS4 version is censored. The censorship comes 100% from Sony, not Xseed or Marvelous. The Steam version will be the full uncensored game. So as tempting as it may be, don't blame the publishers for this one. They were given an ultimatum to censor the game or not release it at all. All of the blame here falls squarely at the feet of Sony. So hey, if you were on the fence and deciding whether or not to finally defect to the PC master race, this is as good a time as any. Censorship is impossible to pull off on PC because if an uncensored version exists anywhere, whether it be in a different region or on a different storefront or website, getting rid of it is just a matter of replacing some files. Also, there's decensor patches, and all it takes is a quick search to find out if a game has one or not. For the record, if you're buying games on PC, you should be performing that search for every game you buy. And not to mention we have mods, including some nice 18+ ones. And I could go on and on and on, but the point is, unlike the walled gardens that are consoles, it's the consumer that reigns supreme on the PC, not the platform owner, as it should be. But of course we can't have everything. If you happen to want any of the physical goodies that come with the collector's editions, for instance, or a physical copy in general, and you don't want censorship, then you're pretty much limited to importing it from Japan. Actually, now that I think about it, we've never gotten the best add-ons for Senran Kagura collector's editions anyway. Obviously none of the awesome retailer exclusives that Japan gets, but even some of the more extravagant editions like the life-size mousepad ones that Peach Beach Splash got. So if you must get the game on PS4 and or you want the physical goodies that come with it, import from Japan, it's your only option. Do not give the US or EU branches of Sony a cent. Now that that's out of the way, what's being censored? Well, it turns out the entire intimacy mode won't be available on the PS4. You know, the same mode that's been in every single Senran Kagura game that's released on PlayStation until this one for some reason? According to Tom Lipschultz, the localization producer at Xseed Games, this is due to a brand new policy coming directly from Sony. But of course, they're not allowed to get into more detail and Sony is being silent on the matter, but we can figure it out. Given what we've seen recently, it appears that Sony's new policy is to fuck over small niche publishers. And they tend to do this by waiting until they are done with their games and a mere weeks away from release before telling them, hey, stop, you either censor this game or cancel the release. For example, they have already done this with Omega Labyrinth Z earlier, so this proves it's not just an isolated case. This is not one of those, oh, some rogue employee just overstepped his bounds situation that they try to spin sometimes. This is full-blown company endorsement of censorship. Sony now believes they have the right to tell you, the consumer, what you are allowed to play. And as I said, it is being done in such a way to fuck the publisher over as hard as possible. In both cases, they waited until the last seconds to tell them, nope, censor the game or it's not coming out. With Omega Labyrinth Z, P-Cube had to actually cancel their entire release because of this. They went through all the effort of getting the game rated by the ESRB and PEGI. They had the localization completely finished. They had to have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and months worth of time and effort on it, and fucking Sony didn't bother to say anything until they were finished with it. It's not like literally the entire game didn't already exist in Asia and they couldn't have seen it. And just like when getting a game rated, you know the publishers show the most objectionable parts of the game when they're getting permission. So knowing this, how much money do you think P-Cube lost because of this betrayal? And they're just a small publisher, they can't really say shit about it. And unfortunately for them, most of the games they bring over are on Sony consoles, so they can't risk talking back either. Sony is literally bullying small publishers that are dependent on them into submission. Do you think they try to pull this shit on Rockstar with GTA, for example? Do you think they're gonna force Rockstar to remove strip clubs from the game? I highly doubt it, because unlike some small niche publisher, Rockstar has the resources and connections to actually fight back. Rockstar can tomorrow announce that they're going Xbox and PC exclusive, and their legions of fans will gladly abandon Sony and follow them. Oh yeah, there's gonna be some bitterness among the Sony fanboys, but I'm quite sure Rockstar is gonna manage just fine if they did that. But either way, with the Omega Labyrinth Z situation, you might have given them some benefit of the doubt, because shortly before it was cancelled entirely, a bunch of cucked countries were virtue signaling about banning the game outright before Sony went and banned it themselves. If someone were to tell me that they were receiving political pressure to do just that, I would have believed it. But now that we know better, the benefit of the doubt is completely gone. It's obvious that this is entirely Sony's US and European branches enforcing this censorship. And most importantly, it's not a one-off. This is a new policy. And ultimately what this means is they can't be trusted at all going forward. So do what I do and abandon Sony entirely. Literally the only reason I bought a PS4 in the first place was for Senran Kagura. At least so I could play it a few months earlier before the PC release comes out. But now, all of that's been solved. The PS4 version is censored anyway, and the PC version is releasing at the same time. Sony has in one fell swoop made it so I don't need them for jack shit anymore. And speaking of dumb shit and Sony, isn't it hilarious how they have completely swapped places with Nintendo? A few years ago, I never would have predicted I'd be saying this, but remember just a few short years ago when it was Nintendo of America that were censoring everything under the sun? Completely butchering titles like Fire Emblem Fates and Tokyo Mirage Sessions? All the while, Sony was the go-to platform for people who didn't care for puritanical moral authoritarian busybodies dictating to them what they can play? But now, in current year, it's the exact opposite. Nintendo has finally grown up and seems to have completely reined in Nintendo of America and Treehouse, and we are now seeing the likes of Senran Kagura Reflections, which FYI is basically nothing but the intimacy mode that Sony censored dialed up to 11, being released over here completely uncensored, on a Nintendo console. Let that sink in. It's been years since Nintendo last got caught censoring any third-party games in the West. It seems they have finally learned that, hey, they like money. So just like Steam, they're trying to give everyone what they want. Meanwhile, Sony looks at this and goes, hey, you know the bad idea that Nintendo has finally moved away from? Now that there's no one there, why don't we go there and do that? Yeah, they are the ones now trying to regress us back to the 90s again, and in my opinion, if that's what they want to do, they can go die in the past they are trying to regress us to. Cause hell, there is no place for this type of censorship or gatekeeping in the future. These crusty old dinosaurs and the cucks that support them can try to fight that fact all they want, but in the end their struggle will not only be in vain, but it will cause a lot of bad blood with the actual customers in the process. So the longer it takes them to get their heads out of their asses, the less people will be willing to forgive them once they finally do. And that's funny because since Sony's gaming division seems to be the only part of the company still making money, this isn't exactly a mistake they can afford to make right about now. I mean, damn, this just doesn't make sense. What the hell are these executives smoking? Their cancerous movie division seems to have leaked into their gaming division. Who the hell would have thought it was a good idea to poison their one remaining profitable sector with the same shit that is clearly killing a different sector? I gotta ask, are they really too stupid not to realize that they should have done the exact opposite? Well, obviously that's a rhetorical question. I guess they are. They've proven it. We already have the answer right in front of us. So I'll say it again, please do what I'm doing and just abandon Sony entirely. And I know it's going to be hard, especially if you have developers making games exclusively for Sony platforms like Atlus with the Persona series, but now is the time to put your foot down and pressure them into finally moving to other platforms like the PC or the Switch. And even if they don't at first, they won't have a choice once we stop buying any of their stuff on PlayStation. We just need to be real careful how we play this because we need to let them know that it's not because we don't like their games anymore. Their games are actually perfectly fine. The problem is the platform they are on can't be trusted. Let's put in all the effort we can to make that exclusivity deal they must have signed one that's not going to be worth renewing. Now back to Senran Kagura, Xseed and Marvelous Europe both grudgingly said that they have to respect the wishes of the platform holder. And by that they mean follow this new policy and either censor the game or don't release it. And well, as a consumer, it's my policy not to support platform holders who don't respect the wishes of their customers. And we'll see who's gonna win this fight. Oh, and in case you're a fanboy who insists on sticking with Sony, in case you want the perfect example of how low their opinion of you is, here's the gem I promised you at the very beginning. Here's what they themselves said when talking about this censorship. If every game released was the same, why buy the next? Yeah, I know, right? Why buy the next? Tell that to everyone who buys the yearly iterations of Call of Duty or sports games. But anyway, I'm not making that up. Check the links in the description. That's literally how they responded to someone pointing out that they are removing a feature that's been in all of the past games for years. And I think I responded to them pretty well. Here goes. This is what I said. If every game released had less features than the ones that came before, why would we buy any game after the first? This is the future that Sony is trying to get us to accept, it seems. And that's a true statement. Judging by their actions, what other conclusion can we come to? I mean, goddamn, Sony, games and features that were on your platform just fine for years and even got people to buy the platform just for them. Like me, for instance, as I mentioned before, Peach Beach Splash is the reason I bothered getting a PS4. And now, all of a sudden, they are a problem and must be removed? What changed? Well, I've heard the rumors of what changed. Apparently, Sony's headquarters in Japan eased off of their western branches a little bit, and this is the result. This is why Japan can't turn their backs to these incompetent idiots. Well, either way, okay, if that's how you want to be, then the fans you had for years now suddenly have no reason to stick with you and will move on to platforms that don't treat them like babies, like Steam or Nintendo in current year. And at this point, if the few developers and publishers that are still PlayStation exclusive have any brains, they're gonna see the writing on the wall and see what's coming and jump ship before they get caught up in the mass exodus and the loss of money. Now I'm gonna say there may not be a lot of overlap between, for instance, God of War and Senran Kagura fans. There sure as hell is between Persona and Senran Kagura. So again, take notice, Atlas. Join the 21st century and come over to the PC Master Race already. We're gonna treat you with respect there. And as for Sony, may your gaming division fail the same way the rest of your company has been. Because the way things are going for you, the sooner that happens, the sooner exclusives being held hostage by you are free to move on to better platforms, and we're going to be way better off for it. Now, for the record, I'm not going to be doing anything retarded like burning my PS4 or anything stupid like that, because I already paid for it and Sony already got my money. So all that's going to do is, well, nothing but make them point and laugh at me. But I sure as hell will not be buying any more games that aren't imported from Asia on it, and I'll be letting everyone I know, both online and in meat space, what you did and that you can't be trusted. And sure, you're always going to have your blind fanboys, but the majority of Sony's customers couldn't care less what platform they're playing their games on. And every time I see those people, I intend to let them know that Sony has become the bottom of the barrel. Oh, and I know what some of you guys are thinking out there because I've seen responses like this already. Oh my god, I can't believe you want to doom an entire company because of one bad decision that you didn't like? I hope you realize that their first-party games are pretty good and don't deserve to die. And to that I have to say, well, yes and no. Looking at it from my perspective, they are actively destroying something I like and not really giving me much else, so why wouldn't I want them to go away? But, my own personal opinions aside, Sony will not be doomed. At least not all of it. Their game development divisions may end up okay. Look at Sega, for instance. Sega dropped out of the console market entirely after the Dreamcast flopped, and despite that, they are still magically around making games except for other platforms, so if I didn't know any better, it's almost as if the segments of the company making the games are completely independent from the platform owner segment, and thus can exist without it. So don't worry, Sony fanboys, even if PlayStation dies, Sony will still be making games, though possibly under a different name once all the bankruptcy proceedings are finished, for other platforms. as long as they are still good and worth keeping around anyway. Oh, and before I sign out, I also have to mention this. Of course, the usual cuck squad is out shrieking at us that this is such an insignificant thing to be mad about. So going through what I usually say, first off, if it's so insignificant, then it shouldn't have been censored. Why aren't you shrieking at Sony for censoring something so insignificant instead of at us for being mad at it? If you guys did that, you might actually be useful for once in your lives. And second off, these NPCs are the textbook definition of useful idiots. They don't understand that all censorship of fiction or free speech is bad, and the second the things they don't like, or that they don't care about, are censored, then the things they do like are next in line. These dipshits are like villagers in a city 10 miles away from the front lines of a war that refuse to help that city that's currently under attack. They're all sitting back going, why would we care? Our city isn't being attacked. Why do we care what happens to those guys? We don't really like them that much anyway. We disagree with pretty much everything they say, so let them die. And then inevitably when the front line falls and they become the new front line, they are forced to face reality. And when they are freaking out about it, that is when we will get to point and laugh and tell them that they are overreacting about such insignificant shit. But I'm gonna enjoy doing that because once the stuff we like is already gone, we literally would have no reason to fight anymore. What reason do we have to stand with the cucks that allowed that to happen in the first place? They are the reason our stuff went away. Are we just gonna help them now just to be nice and save their stuff so the same thing doesn't happen to them? Oh hell no, fuck that shit. Let them fully enjoy being on the receiving end of what they did to us. Cause hell, by this point, we'll most likely already be on our own completely separate platforms anyway. So when you think about it, it's not like we need to care what happens to them at that point. Let them die in the bed they have made for themselves while we open up a beer and laugh. Please be sure not to give Sony of America or Europe any more money, by the way. And that's all I gotta say, guys. Thanks for listening.